I would like to introduce our first speaker from Unity, Emory Irpan, who's going to talk about a look into the impact that the games industry has had as a result of COVID-19. Emory, are you ready to get things kicked off?
Thanks for giving the time to kind of talk about this. My name is Emory, and I'm here to talk to you about a few takeaways from our investigation into the impact that COVID-19 has had on the gaming industry. The full report for this is actually going to be available for free download tomorrow, but today I'll be giving you a preview of what's inside. And I apologize, I have my laptop keyboard right next to my computer, so you might hear some clicking. I'm going to try my best to tap very lightly. So a little bit about me. I've been working on games ever since I was a kid. I made Flash games way back in the pre-Adobe days when they were still made in Macromedia. And I ended up actually working as an artist on several indie titles. I eventually transitioned over to working as a product manager and producer on some games that you might have heard of before, such as The Sims and Call of Duty. But first, let's talk a little bit about Unity. Unity is best known for its game engine, which powers 53% of the top mobile games on the market, as well as experiences on PC, console, and mixed reality. Unity has created a complete platform that enables you to not only create, but operate and monetize your games as well. In addition to our core game engine, our monetization platform has massive scale. We serve over 114 million ad views every day and help over 60,000 devs make a living creating awesome games. And we actually also recently acquired Delta DNA last year, which provides sophisticated player engagement tools for game makers. And this is powered by deep data analytics. It's an end-to-end solution that enables game developers to better understand their players and create a personalized experience for them in real time. And as anyone who has tried to learn on a live service before, it's not a one-man job. And producing these kind of industry insights is really no different. Our team here at Unity has worked at some of the most established developers and ad networks in the business. So we really understand gaming, monetization, and most importantly, how the both of them work together. If you'd like to learn more or get in contact with us about this, there's going to be a contact detail at the end of this presentation. Okay, with all of that fun stuff out of the way, let's dive into the report. So before I really dive into the takeaways, I want to talk a little bit about how to read the charts that are presented on the next few slides. Unity and gaming in general have grown a lot every year, which means it's hard to compare the raw values of each year. So the chart on the left might show what raw data might look like. And as you can see, 2020 increased by quite a bit, but it's hard to exactly compare 2020 and 2019. So to solve this issue, we normalized data to the first week of each year, which became our baseline value. And every subsequent data point is basically a % change above or below the baseline. This means that the first week of the year will start at 0%, and then subsequent weeks will be plus or minus the baseline percentage number. This way, we're actually able to see with more clarity what the true difference was between each year. So with that, let's dive into some takeaways. So this is actually my first time attending a Pocket Gamer Connect, but I imagine from the name of the conference that a lot of you might be interested about mobile games. So our first takeaway is about mobile games. Immediately after the declaration of COVID-19 by average, but this increased to around 1.6 or 1.65 after the pandemic. While this 5.9% increase might not seem like much, when you consider the millions of gamers around the world, this is actually a really big increase in overall usage. We actually tend to see a lot of users playing only one game, and then a roughly equal amount playing anywhere from 2 to 4 games. But during the global pandemic, many of these one game only users picked up at least one other app to occupy their either newfound free time or to work with during the day. So once again, this is quite a bit of new gaming traffic when you factor it across every user in the world, even if the number itself is small. And the spike is actually quite noticeable in March. All right, for the next takeaway, we actually looked at what kind of apps users are playing. So we noticed that many commuter apps, which are apps that players tend to play while commuting on the bus, the subway, or simply during breaks in the workday, saw a much smaller usage bump when compared to mid or hardcore apps. Commuter apps only increased their daily active user count by 4% compared to baseline, but mid and hardcore apps increased them by 35% when compared to 2019's baseline. So if you look at the chart over here, you'll notice that immediately after the pandemic declaration, both commuter and hardcore apps spiked in usage above their 2019 baselines. But in the weeks following, commuter apps actually came back down to similar DAUs when compared to 2019, which is those dotted lines over there, while hardcore apps continue to spike upwards. You'll also notice in 2019, both kind of apps generally performed under the DAU baseline. So this is actually due to the baseline week being during the winter holiday season, which generally has much stronger DAU performance when compared to the early half of the year, such as February and March. The fact that hardcore apps were able to outperform the holiday season is a strong signal that gaming habits changed in 2020. So that's that orange line over at the top. So this is actually quite a large shift year over year. And you might be wondering why that line actually starts trending upwards above the baseline early in the year. That's something that I'll cover in this presentation as well. So our next takeaway is about mobile ad revenue, which is obviously something that a lot of mobile publishers are quite familiar with. Mobile ad revenue has become more and more relevant in the competitive space of mobile gaming as games compete for the same pool of disposable income money. Ads represent a way to monetize the large majority of players who will never spend. So, for example, and from my experiences, games tend to have payer conversion rates of anywhere from 2 to 3%. And you're actually pretty happy when they get to around 4 to 5%. And I've even seen games that go up to 8%, but those are quite rare. This means that anywhere from 97 to 98% of your players will not generate revenue for you at all unless you use ads. We saw 2020 actually performing above baseline already when it came to ad traffic and overall ad revenue, but COVID-19 represented a large spike upwards for both metrics. After the global pandemic, ad impressions, which are also known as ad views, or you might hear them called ad starts, depending on which type of providers that you're working with, went up by 56% when compared to 2019, and ad revenue went up by 60%. So obviously both very large increases. This increase in ad traffic closely mirrors the overall DAU increase that we saw in the mobile industry. I won't be covering DAU trends in today's gaming presentation for mobile specifically, but that's actually going to be available in the full report, which will be released tomorrow. That full report also includes data all the way up until mid-May, whereas the data we're showing you over here today only goes up until the end of March. So be sure to check that out once it gets sent over. And the last takeaway I really want to talk about today is how we saw gamers in different parts of the world react to COVID-19. What we noticed was that each region reacted similarly in terms of volume spikes, but they were spaced out differently in accordance to the quarantine timing. So you'll notice on the chart over here that China was actually the first to implement stricter methods, with the authorities implementing like a stricter lockdown in the Wuhan province on January 23rd, 2020, and that kind of spread out throughout the country throughout the rest of the year. Italy followed, along with Korea, on February 23rd. So I believe Lombardy and the northern provinces of Italy entered lockdown after a surge of confirmed cases in that area, and the entire country would be locked down by March 8th. South Korea followed a similar timeline with the residents of Daegu being asked to stay home on February 20th. And then lastly, much of the Western EU and the US were enabling stricter measures as the World Health Organization announced a global pandemic on March 11th. And you'll notice for most of these charts and the ones previous, we denoted the COVID-19 line as the day that the global pandemic was actually declared by the World Health Organization on that week of March 11th. But obviously before that declaration, there was already a lot of traffic changes happening. And you can see that phased out in the 2020 gaming volume charts over here by percentage change. So if we look at 2019 for a second, you'll notice that the line for China spikes up in 2019 and then actually comes back down. This is due to the annual Chinese New Year celebration, which drives a lot of traffic in that region. In 2020, you'll notice that that line also spiked up during that same time frame, but then sustained throughout the year due to COVID-19, which is interesting because it means that players kept kind of the same gaming habits and usage as they had during this large regional holiday all throughout COVID-19 for China in specific. If you take a look at the specific countries, I know it's kind of hard to see with all the lines overlapping as they are. You notice that each one experiences a similar uptick in traffic throughout the year during their quarantine timings. And one important thing to note here is also because the holiday season was our baseline, in 2019, you'll notice that everything kind of performed below baseline. That's as expected because usually traffic is a little bit worse right after holiday season. But in contrast, COVID-19, you actually see a lot of regions outperforming their holiday baselines, which is a really, really stark trend that we haven't seen in previous years. So what's next? You can download the full report tomorrow, June 10th. I actually only went over 4 of the takeaways that were in that report, but tomorrow we'll be releasing all 19 takeaways along with updated data that goes through mid-May instead of just March. If you'd like to learn more about Unity or our offerings, the contact emails are located on the screen over here, and I think you'll also be able to find them in the Pocket Gamer Connect's meet and match system as well. I know this was pretty brief. We didn't want to give away too much about the full report that's actually coming out tomorrow. Just timing-wise, we wanted to give you guys a sneak preview about everything. So I think that actually leaves us plenty of time for questions. I want to thank you for your time and hope everybody's staying safe.
Hey, thank you very much. We really do appreciate that. And yeah, we do have some questions that have come in. I'd like to get to some of those. Actually, one of the more common questions I see here is about the data. Is this data coming in from just the Unity ad network, or is this coming in across multiple ad networks?
This is just the data that we can see. So whenever we make these kind of reports, we feel confident if we can actually see the raw events coming in, which is coming from Unity's monetization platform. So we have pretty good confidence that this encompasses good coverage over the gaming industry. We see quite a bit of ad views and ad traffic on our network. But of course, we can't say the same for the visibility of data on other networks, but this is what we can see on our side.
That's totally fair enough. Now, one of the things that I've read about happening in other industries is while consumption of the media in other industries has gone up, a lot of the businesses that have been shut down have reduced their advertising spend. Mm-hmm. So how does this fare for games and for ad revenue? Are people going to stop seeing as many new ads come in to fill their inventory?
So that's an interesting question. We have seen pretty curious performance that actually behaves in the inverse to a lot of traditional brand spend, as we would call it, from non-gaming advertisers. Right now, gaming advertisers are actually spending roughly actually the same amounts as before. So immediately after the crisis kind of happened, a lot of the clients that we work with decided to pull back a little bit. But what they also noticed, and we'll see this tomorrow actually when we release the full report, is that the cost per install to get a new user through mobile advertising actually dropped by quite a bit. And then sensing this opportunity of mobile advertisers decided, hey, this is a great chance to get users, quote unquote, on the cheap, because there's a lot more users in the system who are actually more willing to convert when they look at ads. So they actually ramped it back up. So we ended up kind of at the same levels, but with a lot more traffic overall.
That's fantastic to hear for right now, but how long does the fairy tale last? When does this go away? Does it go away?
If I had a crystal ball, I would be a very rich man right now if I could tell you the exact but I would say that we are starting to see a little bit of slowdown in that regard, especially in early May. So you'll see that once again in the full report that we're releasing tomorrow. I would anticipate as you go into, let's say, Q3 or Q4, you might see a little bit more change in overall habits from that, especially as other industries start to pick back up and the overall world starts turning again. But I think overall, gaming itself as an industry has weathered the storm, so to say, quite well. And then we'll probably continue to throughout the year. Who knows what happens, later in the year and everything else, but at least that's our current prediction.
So here's an interesting question. has the do you have country level data that you can access?
So as you saw in the, I believe it was the last slide or the slide before it, when we broke it down by region, we do have country level data that we do take a look at in terms of traffic.
So how has Sweden done? Because of all the countries that locked down, well, Sweden didn't really. Did they see similar trends in advertising revenue and advertising rendering?
So that's a good question, and I probably couldn't tell you off the top of my head without, digging back into data and looking at Sweden specifically. But I think it would be something that's interesting to explore. I think Sweden, if it followed the trends of the Western EU, probably saw that same small spike upwards on the week of March 8th, which is the week that contained March 11th. But I couldn't give you with any 100% clarity without going through and doing the queries myself again.
Fantastic. One last question that just came in. How did ecpms and Arpu of ad monetization get impacted?
Okay, also a great question. We have that data in the full report that's dropping tomorrow. To give you kind of a hint of it, ecpms did overall decrease compared to baseline, but that's kind of expected when you look at the increase in volume. As more users compete for the same advertising budgets, you're going to get lower CPMs, as well as the lowered cost per install coming through those. But overall revenue, as you can see from the ad revenue graph that we showed earlier, went up despite the decrease in individual ecpm, and that's just due to the massive overall traffic that we saw.
All right, so I don't want to steal too much of the thunder from your release tomorrow, but I am kind of stalling as we wait for the next speaker to get ready. So I'm going to ask if there's any data that you have around in-app purchasing volume.
So we do actually have data around in-app purchasing volume. We talk about it in tomorrow's report as well. I keep saying check back tomorrow, which is a great way to kind of hunt it off. But I think there's going to be interesting insights into that. So if I talk about it at a high level, we actually saw overall in-app purchasing volume increase, but individual revenue per player actually decreased. So you had a large increase in the volume, but then the individual, LTV coming from in-app purchases from each individual player went down. And that kind of echoes with a lot of people, with what a lot of other industry reports have started saying as well. And we didn't see anything different on ours.
So we have more people spending, but they're spending less.
Yes.
I really can't wait until your report tomorrow. These are fantastic teasers. Now, is this a report that we can look for quarterly from Unity, or is something that you've just decided to do just as a result of COVID?
So our team over at Unity has really started to leverage the kind of data that we can see coming into our systems. What we wanted to make sure was that the data is always anonymized and aggregated. We work with a lot of developers and a lot of major developers and publishers all over the gaming ecosystem, and we want to make sure that we're not giving away anything specific by each one. So what we've actually started to do is do almost a yearly roundup at the end of each year of aggregated performance across every single publicly available app category. So stuff like puzzle, match 3, etc. They're also all included in that report. So we actually released a 2020 mobile monetization report, I believe earlier this year in February, if I remember, which sums up all of 2019 in terms of ecpm performance, in terms of CPI, basically all the metrics that you might be interested in. I think the full report is over 20 pages. So definitely something to worth looking at over there. I think that's available somewhere on our website. I couldn't tell you the exact link right now, but I'm sure our PR guy is texting me right now saying, use this link. But we're also releasing a demand-focused report. So for advertisers, looking at conversion rate, IPM, installs per million, as well as CPI, cost per install, very soon, I think actually this week, which is going to summarize all 2019 from the demand perspective. And then lastly, we have this one that's coming up, the COVID-19 one. Now, we usually try to limit these reports to around once a year, just because they involve pulling quite a bit of data.
Fair enough, yeah.
If anybody's ever used like Google Cloud before, you notice query costs can rack up every terabyte that you're pulling out. And when we're pulling across millions of devices and thousands of developers and hundreds of thousands of games, they do tend to stack up. So we tend to try to do these once a year, but due to the COVID situation, we saw a lot of interesting insights, so we decided to release one around the half-year point instead of just at the end of the year as well.
No, hey, huge thanks to Unity for actually doing that and making that data available. I did get another question in. So if you were working in a project right now as a game developer, would you kind of put the pedal to the floor and try to get it out before the quarantines are lifted, or do you think you'd kind of ride it out and wait until things get a little more normal?
So it depends on what strategy you want to have, right? So like, let's say your game is heavily ad focused. Right now, ad revenues are up by quite a bit. So it might be worth pursuing that. If your game is really only IAP focused, as we talked about, overall IAP revenues are up, but individual Arpu per user is down. And if anybody is familiar with the mobile gaming ecosystem, the way that you end up running your advertising is user acquisition costs have to basically be under your overall user LTV or lifetime value. That is, if a user brings you $1 over the course of their lifetime, your user acquisition costs on average should probably be less than $1. So you can make money off each user in a way that's sustainable. So depending on how your game is actually set up, if it's mainly IAP focused, you want to revisit how that LTV model looks for that game. If your game is more ad revenue focused, like a lot of hyper casual games that we've seen as of late, and you can just kind of coast off a lot of the increased volumes right now, then you might want to try to push it to sooner. But it'll vary based by game. I don't want to give like an overall blanket answer.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, it does depend, but it seems to me that getting more people, even if they're spending less now, gets more people used to spending in your game, and they might pick up their spending a little bit later when their jobs and income and employment is all more secure. I have a hard time seeing this as anything except a wonderful opportunity to ride the wave that you showed in your first few slides with just a lot more people playing games. I mean, maybe they're playing the same number of hyper casual games, but the number of mid-core games that people are playing just seems to be going through the roof. If I were working on a mid-core game, I think you'd bet I'd try to launch it now.
Yeah, mid-core is definitely a great opportunity right now, just because a lot of people have more time to change their habits. A lot of these commuter apps that we saw are, things like puzzle games or quick pick up and play things that you might play walking between a meeting at work or while waiting for the bus to arrive. Whereas the mid-core titles are sometimes even full ports of games that you might see on PC and console that are now mobile, and they require you to sit down and have a concentrated session for almost 20 or 30 minutes. People used to not have that kind of time in their busy workday, but with a lot of people working from home or working remotely, there's a lot more attention for those longer experiences.
Yeah. One quick question to finish up here. We have people asking the report that you drop tomorrow. Where can we get it? Is it at the URL at the bottom of the screen currently showing?
So I would have loved to include that link in this presentation as well, but I think they were finalizing it up as we were kind of wrapping this one up as well. I think the easiest way to keep abreast of what's happening is you can probably follow Unity on LinkedIn and Twitter. They'll probably drop the link over there as well. I've been told that the full report is going to be entirely free. It's not going to be gated behind an email sign up or anything, but that's what I've been told. Don't take my word for it. So that should be available to everybody pretty soon tomorrow. I think also we talked with the folks over at Pocket Gamer yourselves, and when you guys send out the kind of video recordings and such tomorrow, because I'll be tied with the full report release, I think the link might be included in there as well.
That is fantastic. Thank you very much. Hey, if we go give a great big virtual round of applause to Emory. Thank you, and thank Unity for getting us kicked off on this track and for offering such a lot of valuable data. Again, I can't wait to get my hands on that report tomorrow.
Yeah, I think at the last count when I was looking at it, it was over 30 pages of content. So definitely a lot of cool takeaways in there. And the team at Unity has worked quite hard on the report, and they're all obviously excited as well to kind of get it out in the public.
All right, thank you very much.